What do you want?
I want to ask you some questions.
The key to the future is finally unearthed.
I always told you, you're special.
Hey everybody, welcome to In Case You Missed It. This is a podcast where we talk about movies that maybe you didn't see because they didn't have a big appeal or didn't gain the popularity that we think that maybe they should have, or slipped under the radar and just weren't received as well, or received at all because you might have missed it. But these are all movies that we think maybe you should give a second chance or not. But I am Josh, and this is my co-host, Scott.
Hello.
And today we're talking about Blade Runner 2049, the 2017 Denis Villeneuve movie. And, you know, it didn't do the numbers that they were hoping it would do, definitely. Definitely a huge budget. I think was $120 million, I think. $150 million.
Yeah, and I even read something. There was it was like 185, but they dropped it down to 150 because of like tax breaks and stuff. It actually only made it about 150. But yes, in tradition of the original Blade Runner, it was a commercial flop.
Yeah.
But has gained kind of a cult following. And Josh, did you see this in theaters when it came out?
I did. I saw this. This was actually really cool. I saw it at like an AMC Dolby theater. So it was like the projection was just incredible and the sound was amazing. So it was like the perfect atmosphere to see this movie in.
See, I don't think I did.
Okay.
I mean, shame on me. I forget what. Did I see this? See, now that you said you saw it, now I can't remember. I thought I hadn't seen this in the theater, but
yeah, I
don't know. Shame on some of us for not seeing this movie because it's fantastic. And
it is.
I think this is I mean, first of all, as far as budget goes, I was a little surprised to see this was $150 million.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would guess at around 100. I'm not going to pretend to understand movie budgets,
right.
What goes into it. Although I will say, in defense of this movie, some of the things, and we'll talk about how this movie looks, but a big part of what I have to think was the cost was visual effects, because there are a lot of visual effects.
Absolutely.
But I would say what probably would inflate the budget is that Denis wanted to give the time to the VFX artists to do the VFX right, especially
Definitely.
a big part at the end. And I think that's, you know, and I was actually thinking as I was watching this, Denis movies and Arrival had some great visual effects. This does, both Dune movies do, and people are complimenting his movies on the visual effects.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a vision to him, but just the fact that he is willing to give the time to artists. I don't know if people realize that when you see bad visual effects in a movie, it's not that the artists can't pull it off. It's they weren't given the time, because
Absolutely.
visual effects take a long time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think like in the past, like 25, 30 years, like the integration between cinematography and visual effects has gotten so like important and stuff. And this movie actually won the Oscar for best cinematography and best visual effects. Roger Deakins' first Oscar after 14 nominations.
Deakins is at it again.
Finally did
That's my first note, because this movie is just
beautiful.
Breathtaking.
Yeah.
At least the first frame of every scene could, you know, is the kind of thing some douchebag would like put as a picture with like an inspirational quote over it. It's just it looks so good. I don't know how many cinematographers, and he may be the only one, that I would say he's someone it's probably worth watching his filmography,
Mm-hmm.
just to watch what he's done, because everything he films
Yeah.
is
There's such a
remarkable.
variety.
Yeah, although I say that, and if I did that, it means I have to watch The Village again, and I'm not doing that.
In case you missed it, that's okay.
So yeah, I'd rather be trapped in the woods with a some sort of cult than actually watch The Village again. So, but anyway, yeah, this movie is just, and you know what, to me, because one of the criticisms of this movie is the pace, and we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But the pace of the movie, it's not in a hurry. But for me, and I guess because I'm a visual person, one of the things that keeps it from feeling too slow to me is just the visuals. It's the fact that when you have seen transitions, you're like, my God, this is gorgeous.
Yeah. Because you literally could, I mean, if you wanted to cut this thing down to just the story and getting through it, I mean, you could cut 45 minutes out of this thing. But I wouldn't want to, because that pace is just perfect. And along with the incredible visuals, it's never boring to look at.
And you know what? And I was actually thinking this, and we'll talk about comparisons to the original, which I don't think you and I are going to have a lot of arguments on this compared to the original. Yeah. But the thing I know is because the first one, I think, is it's not paced very quickly. Both of these are very slow. Slow is not a good word, but you know what? To me, that's always been sometimes that's a sign of something that's very auteur driven. You know, you need something with those flaws in it to feel like somebody with a single vision created it. And I feel like pacing is usually, at the thing is what, where that comes from, or what causes that is that somebody with a single vision kind of created. I thought was interesting. They really spent a long time on the intro of Joy, Ana de Armas's character, who is like his hologram wife, and I think this was one of Ana's first major roles.
Yeah, it was. I think it was early on. It was like, I'm trying to think of what else would have been around this time. She was kind of I remember she was doing like Small Things and some stuff. And I don't know if this was before Knives Out. I can't remember, or it was right around that time, maybe a little before. But yeah, she's great. I mean, that character is so interesting. It's like and I'm sure we'll get more into it later, but it's the whole character is really a lot about like just marketing in the real world and like pushing, like trying to give people what they want or what they think they want. And it's just kind of all that packaged up into this character.
Yeah, I put Ana de Armas, good argument for robot girlfriends. But I think what got her a lot of attention from this role is obviously she's beautiful. But I think I think aside from that, there is such a charm she brings to that character. I think it's very easy, especially as I was watching it this time. You kind of fall for her yourself, which is obviously the point of that product is that it's whatever, it's this perfect woman for you. And so I think her performance has to be credited that she brought such a charm to that that you're happy to see her on screen.
Yeah, definitely.
And we talked about the visuals before, but the visual effects on her throughout this whole movie are just astounding.
It's so cool. And it's like the one one of them that stood out to me early on is like when they're up on the roof in the rain, and like she looked like, it's so cool, like the translucency of her, like that comes through sometimes, like lights that are going by overhead, like kind of reveal that. And you're like, oh yeah, she's still like, she looks real, but then you see that you're like, oh right, this is an AI fake person.
Yeah, I actually like looking in, even when they're in their apartment, if she's standing directly in front of a light, you see that shining through her.
Yeah.
Kind of shining through her, just sort of that stuff. But and just that opening scene with her where she is changing outfits a lot is amazing. So cool. Because I did notice a lot of scenes with her and especially one later on, which I actually kind of looked into how they did it.
Mm.
A lot of still camera.
Yeah.
Because visual effects are easier if the camera isn't moving, and I think for the sake of probably time and quality is why they chose to do that.
Yeah. And this movie is really kind of locked down anyway, so that helped.
Yeah, exactly. It made sense. I would always think if you're going to do something with visual effects, yes, it would be easier if the camera wasn't moving, but don't make it obvious,
Right.
that you're going to start doing that. But I think if I'm remembering right, like you mentioned that rain scene, I believe as she walks out, the camera tracks back with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that. And the fact that, then you have all those things going on. I'm like, that's incredible how they did that. And again, if you give artists time, they can pull something off that's pretty astounding.
Absolutely.
I also thought I also like they're having their tender moment in the in the rain.
Yeah.
And actually, for what it's worth, somebody makes a comment later. The I forget the character's name, but that like hooker he meets later kind of almost says something a little condescending about him not being into real women.
Yeah.
But it's weird. You feel that relationship's genuine.
Definitely.
But they're having that little moment, and she freezes up, and he gets a phone call from Robin Wright. And so I wrote here that the future is being cock blocked at home because I'm not answering the phone during that. But it doesn't matter because
it's gonna freeze you up anyway.
Your hologram wife is gonna pause while you answer the phone. And actually, we might as well, it's worth saying something about Ryan. I think Ryan's amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
I like that, and I'm not going to pretend, as we're doing this, I'm not going to pretend to completely understand the world of Blade Runner, but, they're not robots, obviously, the replicants. They're not robots, but they're not really supposed to show emotion or have emotion in some capacity. But and that's why I think this is he's so good in this in being stoic, but not robotic, if that makes any sense. He's good because that doesn't work, when you have, and certainly the original movie did that really well with its replicants, that they were they felt human, even if they weren't very emotional.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see, like, he shows moments where he's like seems more human than the human characters too, like in certain instances where he's like not sure what to do next, or he's like contemplating something, whereas I feel like a lot of the human characters in this movie are just like, this is the plan, this is what we need to do, and they are very decisive in that way, and he's kind of like taking his time to like understand the situation he's in and contemplating it.
Yeah, and I think, and I could have watched this movie 2 or 3 more times just to try and pull some stuff. But a large part of the theme does seem to be, and I think this is similar to the theme of the original, was what it means to be human, which frankly is kind of I thought a very generic theme, but it works here. Like it's a theme that's, it's not super original. It's been done a lot of times before in sci-fi, but I think this does a really good job with it.
Yeah.
I love that line. The line, I think it was in the trailer too, from Robin Wright's character, where she says something about, if you tell either side there is no wall and you've started a war. I thought that was great. I thought that came up later. I thought that came up really well later when he's at the orphanage, and like they show that the kids like knock something over and they're really afraid of whatever that guy is that's running it.
Yeah.
But then Kay, Ryan's character Kay, punches the guy and he starts bleeding and all the kids look up.
Right.
And I like that. And while this is just a small scene, I like this idea of all these kids are like, they're probably less afraid of him now. But it is kind of that idea, like, I thought it went back to her line really well about, well, maybe there is no wall. Right. Like maybe we don't have to like be slaves to this guy because maybe there is no wall. So I thought I like that line.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Do you want to, we probably should have started with this. Do you want to give us a brief, like, set the scene of what this movie's about?
Yeah, I'm like wondering how much to say without like spoiling. Or I mean, I guess you find it pretty early on what's happening.
I mean, if you want to take us maybe through our inciting incident, what kicks
Yeah.
off the plot?
Yeah, so like right at the beginning of this movie, we actually get like text that kind of like sets up this world, and kind of where we are in it. And I really like, I think it works really well, to where you don't have to have seen Blade Runner to understand and enjoy this movie, I don't think.
Not at all.
In fact, I mean, I feel like you don't even need to. Yeah, I think that opening text just kind of sets us up really well. And then we kind of get right into it where we see Ryan Gosling, Kay. He's a Blade Runner who is somebody who is tracking down old replicants and retiring them or killing them so that they, can't do anything bad.
Right. And so replicants were this basically form of AI, and they're just as human as humans.
Yeah.
And because there was an uprising, they became illegal. And so Blade Runners are basically cops that are meant to track down replicants that still exist and retire them, which means to kill them.
Yeah. And what makes it interesting here is that Kay is actually a newer version of a replicant himself, who are ones that are supposedly that will obey. So he's basically tracking down old versions of replicants when he himself is one, which is interesting. But we see him traveling to this farm, where we're assuming he's trying to track down a replicant, where he runs into Sapper Morton, played by Dave Bautista.
Sapper he's a replicant, and just another one that Kay's been tracking to kill.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a little fight, and he does kill him.
Yeah,
and
he does say a line in there which kind of like is like gives us a little foreshadowing to like what the whole plot is going to be about, where he says that he's never, like, you've never seen a miracle before.
Now how does he lead into that though? Kind of something
right.
about basically almost the replicants hunting down replicants. So Kay's character hunting down these old replicants don't understand what it means to be human or something like that, because you've never seen a miracle.
Right.
And we don't know what that means.
Yeah, we don't. But we find out eventually, pretty soon, I think.
He goes to the tree and he sees something carved in one of the roots, which is like, it looks like a date, and it is a date from like 30 years prior. And so anyway, he's got his little drone in his car, and he has it just take pictures of the crime scene.
Yeah.
Which leads to them finding, buried under that tree is a box that has bones in it. And when they're analyzing the bones, they find out that the person who died died about 30 years prior, and they were they were pregnant when they died, and that it was a replicant, which up to this point replicants have not been able to reproduce.
Yeah.
So that kind of kicks off the whole plot. And I liked having something like that has so much weight. I think it kicks off this idea of, obviously, the theme of what it is to be human, but like, and I think someone has a line about this in the movie, that if replicants can reproduce, then, they're not slaves anymore. They deserve rights,
Yeah.
And also, and I know that in the original, it's the Tyrell Corporation, and that goes under, and then, Jared Leto's company buys the Tyrell Corporation and starts making the new type of replicants, which is what Kay is. And obviously, if they can reproduce, we don't need to pay you to make them anymore. So that's
exactly.
And speaking of Jared Leto, I think this was the last time he wasn't insufferable in a movie.
And that's fair.
And I'm thinking this. I think he did this after he won his Oscar for Dallas Buyers.
Yeah,
and I think this was after he won his Oscar, because I think ever since he won his Oscar, he's his ego has just exploded. But he's good in this. He really is. It's kind of like the last chance to see Jared Leto, who I do think is a good actor, but hasn't been a good actor in a very long time because he's so in love with himself and himself as an actor.
Yeah.
So, but I think he's great in this. You go through their company. God, I can't remember what his company's called now.
With Wallace.
Yeah,
Right?
Wallace.
Yeah.
That is stunning. It's such an interesting.
Cool.
Actually, you know what I thought as they're walking through that? This looks like it's inspiring some ideas for Dune.
Oh,
it looks
totally.
It looks like a Dune set.
It really does. Yeah.
Just the it's very stark. But like the lighting, the way the windows, they've got light moving through windows, so light being cast on walls moves in patterns, and like there's water. There's always light shining up and like reflections of water.
Yeah.
The set is
so
just
cool.
It's breathtaking.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
There's bodies hanging in bags, which are replicants, and I love this set. Like it's great.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it actually, and again, speaking of this, like if this is a stepping stone for Denis to make Dune, the sense of scale as well in that set, especially a lot of that movie, but in this especially, there's a sense of scale. Which
especially when they go into like find the records, and it's like just you see that room just huge.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah, it looks awesome.
It does. It looks fantastic. I love his like, I don't know, second in command, Jared Leto. Wallace's love.
Yeah.
Played by Sylvia. Oh, I'm going to say this wrong. Hoeks. Why don't we see her in more stuff?
I don't know. That's a good question.
She is astounding in this movie.
She's great.
I don't think I've seen her in anything else.
Yeah.
Like I hate her in this. Like she's fucking awful.
Yeah.
But that's just a credit to her performance. She's so good in this. I wrote a very clever note. It says, "The villain you love to hate." Love spelled L-U-V. Obviously, that joke works really well in a podcast.
It does.
But no, she's so great, and like it just her asshole level just keeps escalating as the movie goes on. You just kind of think like she can't get any worse.
Yes.
So anyway, one of the things they do in this story that I love is the idea that Kay is the child that they're looking for.
And it's so well done, and like so many, and that's like a big part of the story is, and I think the pace of the movie is like showing him contemplating whether he is or not, and what that means for him.
Yeah, and I like that. It's interesting because Joy pushes, when they're talking about him being the child, she goes, "You are special. You were born, not made." And I guess we're probably jumping into spoilers really early here, but whatever. Turns out he's not. Yeah. But I love because the movie's like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I think for like almost 2.5 hours, not quite that much, but over 2 hours, you believe it. And the way he battles with that, he has a memory in the orphanage, and he had a wooden horse, and he was being chased by like some bullies, and he hides the horse.
Yeah.
Well, in his investigation to find out who this child is, he ends up at that orphanage. And replicants have memories implanted in them, so they believe, so their responses are more human.
Yeah.
And so when he actually goes to a place that exists, that is like, it's where one of his memories, like, what does that mean?
Right.
And actually, I love, and it was funny because it hit me just as hard as the first time I saw this movie. But when he after he finds what he's looking for at the orphanage, he walks over to where his memory is that this horse is, and he finds this horse
exactly where. Yeah.
And it's it's played off as this terrifying moment because it is,
Hmm.
what is this? Because that's so weighted.
Yeah, this might be actually like the slowest paced scene in the movie. Just him looking in that direction of where it is to him getting to the horse and getting it out. It takes a
And
long time to get there,
but I think the
but it
momentum's
works.
in the music. The
Yeah.
momentum is in the music. It has this great crescendo, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying that he finds that, because as an audience, you're like, this means, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And we were told that his memories aren't real. So was he born? Is that a real memory? He
Hmm.
knows that if he is the child, he's going to be hunted and killed. Because that seems to be all anybody wants, is to
Yeah.
murder this kid, because this kid means replicants deserve rights, so
Yeah.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that leads him into this like place where I think all they do is make memories, right?
Yeah.
This woman he meets goes to her place, and she's the one that like creates memories for replicants.
Yeah.
She's in a bubble. She's in a
Yeah.
very large bubble because she has an autoimmune disease, and so she can't leave. But she also can like create any world she wants.
Yeah. Within there. Yeah.
So she's walled off from the world. She's stuck in a box.
Yeah.
But she can create anything. And I do love while they're talking, she's creating like a scene of a kid's birthday,
Yeah.
and like describing this doesn't do it justice, but like she makes the cake and she's turning it. But I notice as she turns the cake, it lights her face. And she starts dropping children around the cake. But it's the fact that like wherever the camera is, they're like rotating. She's pasting these kids in there, but she's like rotating these kids in 3D space.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I have no idea how you even begin, because there's no way those are not CG kids. There's no way those are CG kids. So they shot that practically and like composited in there, and it looks amazing.
It looks great. Yeah, it's like the simple VFX even in this movie are just like so well done, so well integrated. Yeah.
Actually, so Robin Wright plays Lieutenant Joshi.
Joshi.
Did
they ever say that? Did they say the name in the?
I don't know. I'm looking at it on IMDb. That's the only reason I know it.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm trying to figure out, is she a replicant?
That's a good question. Interesting.
Because I actually thought she's talking to Kay at the beginning of the movie about something, but it feels like she's trying to like genuinely have a conversation with him and connect with him, and like, so I wondered if she is a human, is she just trying to like connect with like, if she is human, all her coworkers are replicants for sure. Like, is the head of the LAPD?
Yeah.
Well, no, I guess she wouldn't be the head of the LAPD, but is this person in this high position in the LAPD? Is all her coworkers like fake people?
She's like, and she's the one who like is really pushing for him to find the child and kill the child. So like, that makes it interesting if she herself is a replicant. That makes things more complicated.
I guess the only reason I would think she is not a replicant is because, and actually that was kind of interesting in between this one and the first one, is that sometimes it's a little, I think sometimes what is and isn't a replicant is a little vague. I know there's a fan theory in the original one that Harrison Ford's character is a replicant.
Yeah, I know that's been debated for a long time.
Yeah, and I guess in one of the cuts of the movie, one of the 400 cuts of that movie, I think it's hinted at that he might be.
Yeah.
And like, is that put in for fan service after the fact, or? But there's something where, they say, I think they said something in this movie that these replicants can't lie.
Yeah.
But clearly, and I think, I guess they're in a clever, it's lies of omission. I think they can do that. They can just not tell you anything.
And I guess the one thing that we forgot about the child in Kay's investigation of this, we figure out that he hears a recording from Deckard and Rachel, and it's then that makes us realize, oh, it's their child. If you know anything about the original Blade Runner, if you've seen it, that kind of like brings us into like, oh, connects us to the first movie. Where if you haven't seen it, that's fine too.
Well, that's it, and that is explained later.
Yeah. Right.
So it's one of these things where it's kind of like if you go to the movie version of a book, if you read the book, like you have these aha moments before people who didn't read it. That's kind of what it is. Yeah. I haven't seen the original since high school, and I just watched it again right before we recorded, which was after I rewatched 2049.
Yeah.
So that was nothing to me at the time because I just didn't remember any of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you know what? Actually, these callbacks to the original, how closely this ties to the original, the fact that yes, Harrison Ford is in this movie, they gave that away in the trailer.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford is Rick Deckard in this movie, is a perfect example of calling back to your original that actually serves a story.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lesser filmmaker would have put Harrison Ford in this for the sake of fan service, or as James Gunn is calling it now, cameo porn, which is perfect.
I like that.
That's the best name for it. But calling it cameo porn, a lesser movie would have had Kay looking through audio files and would have accidentally started playing the recording between Deckard and Rachel.
Yeah.
But this is all very important to the story, and that's it's great. I mean, if we haven't made it clear already, like this is one of the best legacy sequels.
Yeah.
I think ever made.
I think it might be in my opinion, like the most improved upon of the original legacy sequels.
Yeah, and there's some contenders for that, but yeah, like it's just a fantastic story.
Yeah.
Told very, but you know, if you're gonna integrate the original parts of the original, make it count, make it worth my while. Don't just. And really, it's the fact that this story is revolving around this, even though we don't know it. I was even thinking like Spider-Man: No Way Home, where they brought in all the guys who played Spider-Man.
Yeah,
it's by no means the worst example of cameo porn. And those guys if the only purpose they serve in that movie is Tom Holland's Spider-Man saying, well, I can't beat all these guys by myself. Oh, there's two more of us? Great. Yeah. Like that's it. So it's not that they don't serve a purpose, but swap them with anybody else.
Yeah, that's a movie that like, especially like upon first viewing, you're like, oh, this is awesome. And then the more you think about it, you're like, well, this is the story of it kind of falls apart for me the more I think about it, especially that movie. But this movie is like, it's absolutely necessary to have him there. And it's not like they were like, hey, we need to make a story with Harrison Ford and just throw him in there. It's so well serves a purpose in continuing the story of the original.
And I love it. What a great jumping off point for this. Mm-hmm. And again, having just rewatched the original where him and Rachel are in love, I think, and they drive off into some beautiful stock footage. Yeah. It's great. Like, and so, but what a great idea. And I tried to find, but I couldn't really find much of like, you know, was there some sort of sequel? Was this solely Denis' idea of like, how do we elevate this story? Like it's a perfect, it's taking the original and using it as kind of a springboard to explore new ideas.
Yeah.
In this world. And the only thing I would say that might be a good thing about this movie not being a commercial success is it's very good, but I'm kind of glad we're not going to get buried in sequels.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it definitely could have made this movie and be like, oh, this is bigger and better than the first movie, and we're going to have like big battles of Blade Runners against replicants and all kinds of crazy action. And it's not that. It's a slow burn. Still looks incredible, but the action is not like overwhelming and just a CGI fest.
And that's and I was thinking as I was watching the first one, nobody would make this movie today.
Yeah.
I think even actually no, I take that back. You could make this movie today if you could still make it for $28 million. Somebody would probably give you $30 million to make the original Blade Runner. But that's one thing I like about it. And I think the reason people should watch this movie is because it isn't structured like a lot of studio movies.
Yeah.
I just feel like people. I suggest movies anymore to people, and don't get me wrong, the traditional 3-act structure, which among others is like the Marvel structure. It's a traditional 3-act structure. There's nothing wrong with it. No. It's worked for many, many years on movies, but the problem is people are so they're so used to it.
Yeah.
That if you throw anything else at audiences now, they don't like it.
Yeah.
And this, I think Blade Runner 2049 is a good example of it. It doesn't have, I think, and it was also advertised as having a bunch of action scenes, and there really aren't that many.
Yeah, that's very true.
Oh, actually, one thing I had a thought about, and her name is Anna, the woman in the like memory thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I don't know if I want to cover this yet.
No, okay.
Oh, fuck it. Huge spoiler. We're doing spoilers. So she's the kid.
She is, yeah.
We find out at the end that she is the kid, and she's the daughter of Rachel and Rick Deckard.
Yeah.
And so the memory, and she alludes to it during her and Kay's scene. So the memory that Kay has that leads him to finding the horse is hers when she was in the orphanage, because they had to hide her when she was born.
Yeah.
So the woman in the box is Rachel. She's dead. Yeah. So my question is, did she specifically plant that memory in Kay? Or does she plant her own memory? I mean, because she does have a line where she says, you know, there's a little bit of an artist in all their work, but that is a specific memory.
Yeah.
I love how they don't reveal, but the foreshadowing of that, because when she looks at the memory, she starts crying and you don't know why. Because we're kind of pulled away from that, because as an audience, we're actually led to believe, and because Kay gets like really upset, because to him, that's proof that it's him.
Yeah.
He's the child, and so he gets really angry and doesn't know what to do. But yeah, is that just a memory she puts in a bunch of people?
I wondered that too, and I wondered like if because like she starts crying because she's like seeing it, and I wonder if it's like a thing where she's planted like these memories in other replicants, and then never expecting like this kind of reaction or this kind of thing to come of it, and now that it is, it's like she realizes how big of a deal it is that that's now all been revealed.
And I don't like, it was the idea that she does she know he's going to be a cop? So she's like, I'm going to plant this memory in a cop
so he'll investigate this.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's so dangerous for her to be found out. Why would she do that at all? So Absolutely. You don't know, is it a subconscious thing that she injected like literally her own memory into him? But
yeah, that's a good question. I feel like this movie is so interesting because there's so many things happening, but I feel like the plot is overall very simple in what everybody is trying to accomplish. Everybody's really going for the same thing, and it's so easy to follow and simple, but there's so many complicated, slower scenes that kind of bring out the emotions of how these characters are feeling. But in the end, it's really, everybody is really just searching for this child, is kind of,
and for different reasons.
For different reasons,
And that's the strength of the writing, the strength of the direction, is that like I was saying, for so many moments, like right at the beginning, when he finds the horse, for example, you know, we know how much weight that carries already. It, like, the movie does a great job of making us feel that this has so much weight to it.
Yeah.
And it has so much more weight to it, which is like an hour into the movie, than the latest, you know, the latest supervillain who's going to destroy the world. Like, I don't even care anymore if you destroy the world.
Yeah.
You know, like that's lost all weight. So this is, you know, this is always the challenge, I think, of storytellers in general now, is destroying the world is not proper escalation. Or the fact that, and there's been lots of movies, including superhero movies, that have established very well that it's making it human, it's making it grounded.
Yeah.
And this story does that really well. Like, and you're absolutely right. It's not a complicated story, but it's the world building, it's the way it's executed. Yeah. I do think, and you know what's funny? I was, right before we started this, I was watching a quick thing with Hollywood Reporter. Denis was talking about Blade Runner and how dangerous it was to make a Blade Runner sequel, but he said, I wanted to make this because I didn't want anyone to fuck it up. And anyone else would have.
Yes, absolutely.
Or I shouldn't say that. Like, I think about other, you know, great directors, David Fincher, Christopher Nolan, even maybe a James Cameron might make sequels that were good, but Denis fits so well into this movie.
Yes. It's absolutely in all of his strengths, just in the pace of his movies. Like you said earlier, all his movies are really very slow paced, but that pay off so well in the end. And just and like I said before, like the cinematography and visual effects, he's such a visual storyteller. And this is such a great example. This movie is like so good at showing and not telling. There's not a lot of like complicated dialogue in this movie. We get a lot of it from like what we're seeing and just simple exchanges between people. Most of what we're getting, like understanding the world and understanding what's going on, is through what we're seeing, not somebody telling us about it.
Yeah, and certainly it feels like such a happy ending with Denis, because he has since made split Dune into 2 movies, and those movies are just phenomenal. Like, this is in hindsight, this is such a great stepping stone for him to have made it. But one thing he said about recently with Dune Part 2 coming out was that he hates dialogue. Not inherently, but more the idea that movies are drowning in it. And you're absolutely right. Like, it's minimalist dialogue in this, but it's enough to make the point. It's showing over telling. And it's kind of funny because the opposite of that is true in the version of the original that has the voiceover, because that's the version I just watched, and it's fucking awful. I know Harrison Ford hates his voiceover in it, and you can hear it in every word. He sounds bored. He sounds like he's in a high school play. It's just bad. And you know what it is? It's dumbing down that movie for the audience. And you can just tell moments that are meant to land, that you're just supposed to absorb in that original, all of a sudden get shit all over because of this very bad voiceover. And I don't know whose decision that was. I'm going to go ahead and guess it was the studio being condescending to its audience, that, people aren't going to have any thoughts or feelings if we don't tell them what to think and feel.
Exactly.
And so, and that's what's interesting, as far as Denis goes, this, like, I do give Warner Brothers a lot of credit, even though this wasn't a commercial success. They understood what a good product it was, what a good film it was, that they trusted Denis then to make 2 Dune movies. We'll give you the money to make 2 Dune movies. And I did hear him say in an interview that, I guess from the outset, Warner Brothers said, we are making 2 of these, no matter what. Third one's in question. At the time, I think they're definitely making that now, but the third one's in question. But they said, we will let you will get to make 2 of these. So I give Warner Brothers a lot of credit for seeing the potential in an artist. Or understanding that, you know, who knows why this movie flopped? Why Blade Runner? It didn't deserve it.
It's interesting because it's like, I mean,
shame on you.
This flopped, and then Dune and Dune Part 2 are huge success. Well, Dune came out, I know, during COVID and was one of the HBO Max same day releases. but still did really well, I think.
It broke even. Yeah, for a COVID movie, I think it
Yeah.
ended up making like somewhere between $400 and $500 million.
Yeah.
But it was
then
enough.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And part 2 just took off. Maybe this was, like you said, like a stepping stone to get to that point. And definitely worth a revisit to all those people who love Dune and maybe haven't seen this.
And you know what's funny? As far as Denis' career goes, since Christopher Nolan has had his career, especially obviously the Dark Knight trilogy, but when you also consider movies like Inception and Interstellar, and even into Dunkirk,
Yeah.
studios are trying to find their next Christopher Nolan, a guy who can write and direct and maybe can adapt things, but also has his own ideas. And not just can write and direct. I can write and direct, but he can do it really well.
Yeah.
And it's a story for a different day. Why the fuck Warner Brothers let Chris get away? But they have one in Denis.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve. Like he's the guy can write, the guy can direct. I know he made some changes to the Dune books that are like they only enhance the book. They only make the story better. And so
I can't think of a bad movie that he's made. There's a couple. I think his first or second movie early on I haven't seen, but everything I've seen is just not less than great.
Yeah,
which is incredible.
Yeah, and did he make anything before Enemy?
He did. I think Prisoners was right around that time.
It might have been just before. Prisoners is great.
Yeah,
Slow
Prisoners.
burn.
Enemy is maybe his weakest one that I've seen, but still very interesting and very well done. Sicario, Arrival, so many great things.
Yeah, Prisoners is Arrival, and actually Arrival. If people haven't seen it, it's like 90 minutes. It's not very long. It's not a brisk pace, but we won't spoil that movie here. But that's worth a watch.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's just it's a subversion of expectations, which obviously this movie does well with it. Making us believe our protagonist is the center of all this, and he's not.
Yeah.
And they, when he finds out he's not special, you have that, that he ends up meeting that group of replicants, and they say like dying for something you believe in is the most human thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I like this idea of being human it's not being destined to do it. It's not being born into it. Suddenly he wasn't destined to be special. He wasn't born into being special. He had to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what he has to decide to do when he finds out he's not this child. He's not the daughter of Rick and Rachel. But speaking of Rick and Kay, Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling have just perfect chemistry.
They're great.
They are. Just absolutely flawless chemistry. I do not want to see these two do well. I guess we won't see these two do a Blade Runner movie again, but I don't want that. I wouldn't mind seeing them in something else that's well written, but they're just incredible.
They're really great. And I love that Denny really gives a lot of time to them upon their first meeting, when you think that Kay is the child, when it's been set up so well. And he's just like, you're like, man, he's like having this deep conversation with his father. And it goes on for a while. It's like he gives them a lot of time to do that. And it's just magnetic the whole time.
Do we know that do we know that Rick is the father of this child they're looking for, whether it's Kay or not when they meet?
Actually, that's a good question. I think he talks about it. I think they do discuss it in that meeting.
You're right. You know what? You're absolutely right. He does know, because it's the thing where Kay is just trying to like, where's this child? Where's Rachel? All this stuff. He's trying to kind of kind of draw him out and
Yeah.
just get some answer. I think Kay wants to find out.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously a very cautious guy. I mean, if you look throughout the movie, Joy is the one pushing him like, no, this is you, you're special. And he's reluctant. So I think he's a very cautious guy. And so he wants to prove to himself that Rick Deckard's his dad before he comes out and says it. I do like I like their little fight. I like during their little fight that Rick has to take a little break. He throws a bunch of punches at Kay. Doesn't want to fight him because Kay is super powered and Rick is not, and Rick throws a bunch of punches at him, and he takes a seat. They're like in this lounge, and he takes a seat for a second.
I read in that scene that they originally shot like a lot more to that fight, with a lot more holograms and things that were supposed to be like working, and more music, and it was just not. And they were working on it for like a few months, working with, I mean, along with other scenes, but working on the scene before they were like, man, we might need to lose the scene altogether. And then it was recut to be kind of much shorter and with the kind of broken holograms and like less music, and it ended up working. And I think it's really great and really interesting.
And we don't need more from that.
No.
It serves its purpose. Storytelling is always, as a director, it's always that balance of, as an artist, telling the story the way you want, but also understanding your audience. Your audience doesn't love this nearly as much as you do. And so I think that's a good example. That's a good example of, I like that scene. I love that scene. Visually, it's great. It serves the story. But as an artist, I'm sure Denis, like, we could make this 10 minutes long, but as an audience, I'm good. I got what I needed out of this. So
especially since that's not what this movie is. And it's like, it's not a lot of action in this movie, but it's the action that's in it is like done so well.
Yeah.
Overwhelming.
It is. Actually, one thing I wanted to circle back to, and this isn't a stirring insight, but obviously both of these movies have themes of classism, and I did love the visual of love when Kay gets to, like, I think it's when he's going to the orphanage. And he's like lands in that junkyard and he gets mobbed by, first of all, he gets shot down by a bunch of people living there. And then he gets mobbed by hobos. I don't know what they are. Yeah. But then Airstrike starts taking these guys out. And then they cut to Love is sitting in her office with glasses on, getting a pedicure. Yeah. A manicure while she's calling for drone strikes. Yeah. And I just thought, what a great visual. What a great visual of classism. And I just thought that was the first great visual of people just stomping on other people because they can.
And she's like using it as like, she's like, I'll let this guy do my work for me, but I'll like make it a little easier for him.
And she calls him a dog. Yeah. And she is a replicant. Yeah. She's a replicant. And so is he, but even she calls him a dog, and she, there is this idea of she believes she's better than him, and it is classism. She has more money than he does. She has more prestige than he does. Yeah. And I like, he's interesting because he's he's a cop full time, but he lives in a shoebox. Yeah. So he's not much above the poverty line, I'm guessing, probably sitting right on it, and she's well above it. But yeah, he's right in between these two classes of people. Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about really quick, if we circle back. So the scene after Kay realizes the memory he has of the horse is real. He goes back to his apartment, and Joy, who is again a hologram, has hired a hooker to be like her stand-in for his body. And they kind of have this interesting threesome scene where Joy syncs up with, what's the character's name? Mariette. Yeah.
It's funny it's funny that she brings her into it, because she's like, I heard you, or like, I saw you talking to her, and like, I thought you liked her or whatever. And it was like, he's like, oh, you were listening. And it's like, kind of like a thing about like today where like, your phone's always listening to you, and like then you're getting ads for whatever you've been talking about. It's like such a mirror to that.
That's exactly what that is. It's
Yeah.
like your phone's always listening. So we just ordered it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll be the next step. Your phone heard you mention dog food, and now it's just going to start ordering it for you. That's great. But that scene, and first of all, that scene, I guess, was shot largely practically.
Cool.
That was an example. I noticed as I'm watching this that, again, a lot of static camera because it's just going to be easier. But apparently they just shot the scene with both actresses at separate times, had them kind of sync up their movements. But the fact that they don't line up perfectly is great. Like, that's an interesting visual. Yeah, like, especially they have a shot behind Kay's head, and like there's like 4 hands on him, and that looks great.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was reading when she walks behind him at one point, Joy disappears. And I guess there was a technical reason the movements didn't sync up between both actresses. And so it wasn't like they didn't know what, but they deliberately kind of took Joy out, but it kind of works. They said it kind of worked for the story because the idea was like Joy disappears as soon as she steps behind him. The idea being that she's just not going to be there if he can't see her. Kind of thing.
It's like it doesn't matter if he's not looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, this is like the big moment of like this whole movie. She's been like, "Oh, you're so special," and all this stuff. And like I feel like this is the moment where it's like, oh, she's just giving him what he thinks he wants, and like trying to get him to buy more upgrades to her system. It's like it's all like the corporate marketing, like pushing onto him through her.
And it's interesting because you believe she loves him. It is sincere. It's very sincere. And that's why when love ends up killing her, you feel really bad for her and for him. But you also you kind of have to go back to this idea, and they play on that later, this idea of like, well, she's programmed to. Yeah. That stripper is not your friend. She doesn't like you. She works for tips. So yeah, and that's why I actually do love. It's an interesting thing where he's after Joy is killed, he sees that ad for her. By the way, tits and ads, like, sign me up. You know, that's if that's the future. But the idea that it's like he's seeing his dead wife, but it's an ad, like this kind of juxtaposition of like, he sees his wife and that makes him, you know, nostalgic, but also like, this is an ad for like, you could go buy another one.
Yeah, exactly.
So the climax of this is, Love has Deckard because they're trying to find, back up before we get to that. They do capture Deckard, the Wallace company. They capture it, and he does have a great scene with Jared Leto.
Yeah.
But the thing that is most astounding of this, I don't think they blew this in the trailer, is they recreated Rachel and the actress Sean Young as she looked in the original film.
Yeah. And I think it's probably the best use of like visual effects youthening work. You know, there's a lot of things that's like, who else have they done? They did in Rogue One, they had the young Tarkin, and then who else have they done this to?
There was another significant. It's funny you mentioned Rogue One, because I read that it was actually because of that, and another significant one they found. I'm sure I can find it.
Oh, maybe Carrie Fisher, also in Rogue One.
That was it. Yes, it was actually both of those. But that was why Denis. That was why Denis decided like, I can't. I want to see where I want to find. He limited the number of shots with her. He wanted to limit the number of shots with her, and he gave the visual effects team a year to finish the shots of her.
Wow.
because that's just it. They can do it. These artists are so talented. They can do it.
Yeah.
But you have to lock things in. You have to have the confidence to lock things in.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is, they didn't even have Sean Young on set. I don't know why, but it's a stand-in. I mean, they probably wanted someone with her dimensions back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Maybe Sean does. I don't know. I didn't look. But it's fucking seamless.
It's so well done. Yeah.
It's and if you've seen that original movie, and I don't know Sean Young, I wasn't alive when the original came out, but there is something so haunting about seeing her like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so well done. And then it's funny because then the scene, basically it ends with him being like, oh, her eyes were green. So it's like all this work is done to that they've done to create her within the movie and as part of the visual effects. It's like, oh, you didn't get it quite right. But I thought
you think if you could make fake people, you would have at least checked the eye color.
Right, exactly.
I thought that was kind of
yeah.
Although I don't know, Jared Leto's character is blind, so what does he know of eye color?
Exactly.
What does he know?
Yeah, it's so well done.
Just a marvel, and I don't know. It's the kind of thing that on top of all the other visual effects, I don't think there's a bad visual effect in this entire movie. No. Everything looks phenomenal. But it's just the kind of thing where, and I don't know who to criticize for this, but it's like people are happy to complain publicly about these productions that are rushing visual effects, and the visual effects look bad, and the artists are overworked and underpaid. But that means we need to shine a light on people that are doing them really well.
Yeah.
Like Denis.
Absolutely.
But artists, and that's actually one thing. I'm not the world's biggest James Cameron fan. I don't like Avatar. I hate Avatar. Actually, I think it's bad. But the one credit I will give to James Cameron is he understands that you have to give these artists time, because to his credit, those Avatar movies look great.
They look great.
They really do. I don't need 3 fucking hours of it, but they look great. And it's because he understands this takes time.
Yeah. He's one of those. Avatar is one of the movies that won best cinematography and visual effects. And it's interesting to think of that movie winning best cinematography, but watching the making of Avatar is, in my opinion, much better than watching Avatar. And it's incredible the way that the innovation in cinematography that he was able to do just to make that work was amazing, of recording the motion capture and being able to go in later to get the shots you want. It's just so cool. So yeah, it's like people who understand the process of visual effects and giving it the time that it needs. So true. And Denny is absolutely one of those people now.
Well, and these are guys these are filmmakers that are excellent examples of, I love in the studio system, so many studios treat basically anyone who's not on screen is expendable. And certainly they do that with directors. They do that with writers. And it is the fact that they aren't expendable.
Yeah.
Of course, when I need to think of an example of them doing that, I can't think of one, but there have been plenty of examples. Actually, the only one that comes to mind is they had Edgar Wright on board for the original Ant-Man movie.
Yeah.
And no disrespect to Peyton Reed. It's fine.
Yeah.
The first Ant-Man, but you have to understand that it was going to be so much better.
Yeah.
Or rather just something much more original.
Yeah.
Than what we got. And yeah, Peyton did his job, but it is, and that's why when you have these filmmakers, they're not expendable.
No.
When you have people like James Gunn, and that's why the only thing that never upset me about Avatar being nominated for Best Picture is because of the way they made it. That changed the way digital cinema was done.
Yeah.
And actually another good example of that is The Volume. Greg Fraser, our Lord and Savior Greg Fraser, designed The Volume for Disney.
Oh, wow.
And it is so obvious when he stopped working on The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Because everything looks like it was shot in a fucking closet. But when he was there filming it, it looks incredible. And the volume is like, it's knowing how to use these things correctly. It's never using these things as a shortcut.
No.
The Batman is another good example of them using the volume. But yeah, it's, and that's why I think this is one of the reasons you and I love this movie and movies like this, and kind of why we wanted to make this podcast is, these types of movies deserve recognition for being really good at what they do. And I fear audiences have almost developed some bad habits, or that they're so used to what they think a movie is.
Yeah. That's very true.
This is what Martin Scorsese's complaining about. Martin Scorsese doesn't hate superhero movies. He hates what it's done to the industry.
Mm-hmm. And it's, like, I'm always excited if I see a movie that's doing something I haven't seen before, or something that I don't see very often. And this is one of those cases for sure. And
that's, yeah, exactly. Like I will give a movie a little more of a pass if I see some genuine imagination on screen.
Yeah.
That is one thing. As I was watching the original Blade Runner again, which you and I have talked, this sequel is very much better than the original.
Yes.
But I do think, and not to be condescending to audiences in 1982, but I bet the original Blade Runner, of the people that saw it, blew their freaking minds.
Yeah.
And there's stuff in that, even I wonder, there's some intense moments in that. Roy's girlfriend is shot and killed, and he's like running his fingers and his lips along the blood stains. Like, that's par for the course now, but I don't know. In 1982, that was probably really fucking weird to see.
That's so
I love, though, actually, in that movie, Roy at the very end kills the head of the Tyrell Corporation by squeezing it, and then I love how you see him stick his thumbs in his eye sockets, and then they cut away, and he just falls to the ground. I'm like, no, like, we've all seen Game of Thrones. That's like, this is adorable now. Just stick those thumbs through it.
Yeah.
If I have to give one criticism of this movie, is that the climax is kind of a formality.
Yeah.
No surprises in it. No. It's a formality. What do you think of it?
I agree. I think really once you get that reveal that Kay is not the child and that who it actually is, I think that's where the slow pace of the movie, I mean, the finale, it still has a bit of that slow pace to it, but I feel like this is a moment where it could start picking things up. Because it's like, there's really no more mystery left in like what's going to happen. We know basically what's going to happen at this point. And because I feel like the whole movie's been building up to that reveal that, oh, he's not actually the child. And then from that point on, it's like, okay, so how do we get to now Deckard meeting the child again?
I just think, and I guess for all the more time I've spent thinking about it, how do you improve upon it? I don't know. The only thing you could do to raise the stakes is maybe make more of an effort to make it seem like Deckard might die, which has less plot ramifications and more story ramifications. The idea of, well, he'll never meet his daughter.
Right.
Because at this point we know, right? We know at the point, once the climax, we know that Anna's his daughter. Yeah, we do. And so I guess you could do that, but it's a conundrum, and I'm sure Denis did his absolute best with it, because, they're in a car, Love and Deckard are in a car, and they're driving to this transport to go off world to torture Deckard. Yeah. And Kay shoots him down. Police cars in the future can shoot down cars. So they do that, and then him and Love just have a big superhero punch up, replicant punch up. it's a weird thing because I'm like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, and maybe it's because I've seen this before, but I'm just like, this is kind of long,
Yes.
and we don't really believe that Kay's going to lose this,
Yeah.
or anything, and Deckard's tied to a chair, so he's not going to help.
Yeah, he can't do anything.
But at the same time, for a satisfying ending to your story, you don't want it to be, punch, drowner. Like,
Yeah.
so it's a tough call. But yeah, it's kind of a formality, and there's nothing wrong with that. A good story is about the journey. It's not about the destination. And so, sometimes you hit these beats.
And I'm glad it was this instead of like we were saying before, how, this movie, like Blade Runner is like a pretty, I mean, it doesn't go over the top with like crazy action or anything. This movie is just kind of like a slow paced mystery as well. So I'm glad that it didn't kind of just take the blockbuster approach and turn into a huge, big fight between a lot of different people and a lot of big spectacle. I think it worked to have this kind of smaller fight, and visually it's still interesting, with the whole water things happening, and they definitely could have done something that was like, oh, huge spectacle, big fight, lots of explosions and things like that, but they didn't, which I think helped as well.
Yeah, I think a less confident filmmaker would have probably said, because they're flying to that platform with Deckard, a less confident filmmaker probably would have said, well, there's an army of replicants waiting. Exactly. And Kay would have brought an army of replicant cops, and they all would have had a big third act punch up where we don't really know the stakes or who's winning, but we're just going to see a lot of cool shots. So exactly. Point to Denis, because it's not something that's necessary. And I think someone with less confidence would have done that.
Yeah. And I mean, he does that in multiple, I mean, like even thinking of like Dune Part 2, which is a huge spectacle in moments, but it really ends with not a huge spectacle.
Yeah.
So it's a thing, like he's good at making that happen and not like trying to go overboard with his climaxes.
Stop it. This is very serious. This is a very serious podcast. We're very serious. We're very smart.
You didn't like to blow his load like that.
Don't we all? And but even Doom Part 1 ends with a knife fight. Spoiler for a movie everyone should have seen by now. It ends with a knife fight, and but there's that, and then so they have the fight. He rescues Deckard, but then he takes his Deckard. Kay takes Deckard to see his daughter.
Yeah,
and I guess I'm wondering. Well, one, and they don't confirm it, but I think it's pretty obvious. I take away from this that Kay dies.
Yeah, I couldn't remember like upon the first. I thought he might have, and then watching this time, because you see him breathing and then he stops. Like you see like no movement at the end there.
He checks the wound.
Yeah.
And that was it, because I'm with you. I've remembered watching this the first time and thinking it was ambiguous, but I thought the fact that you remind us that wound is there, is evidence that no, this is fatal.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to end his arc. If his arc comes to a climax where he realizes to die is to be human, then yes, he has to die at the end, and so he does. And with Deckard getting to meet his daughter, I noticed it's snowing. It's not snowing anywhere else in the movie.
No.
And the interesting thing I thought was, because the whole every set in this is dirty and grungy and dark, but with all this snow on the ground, it covers all that up. It's white. It's clean. I think there's like a purity to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not even going to say that. I'm not going to pretend that I have a clear idea of why that is the case, but I think it visually it works really well. This something, maybe it's this pure moment between Deckard and his daughter and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I like the choice of putting the snow.
I agree. And you can even read further into it and be even more pretentious and think like, oh, it's snow and snowflakes. Everyone is unique, and he's, he's a replicant, but they're all still very unique and still very human in a way.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. No, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we end on Kay, and he's dead or dying, and
Yeah.
we fade to black. So,
Well, we see Deckard in meet his daughter, and then I think we go out on Deckard, right?
do we?
I think so.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
probably right. Yeah, you're right. There's no dialogue spoken.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. How'd you feel? I don't know when the last time you watched this movie, but how'd you feel getting to revisit Blade Runner 2049?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of Denis, and he's one of those filmmakers. I think like anything he makes, I'm gonna watch, just because because I haven't been disappointed by anything he's made, and so it's just exciting to revisit that. And I know when I saw it when it came out, it was absolutely my favorite movie of that year, and it surprised me how much I liked it because of how much I didn't really care much for Blade Runner. But yeah, I think it was a great revisit, and even knowing the whole story didn't make it feel any slower to me either. And like we said before, it's just so great to look at that it's easy to watch.
Yeah, I agree. You know, for some reason, I felt like when I started watching this again, I was like, well, maybe I was caught up in something the first time I watched this, and maybe I won't like it as much the second time.
Yeah.
But no, I really enjoyed it. I'm actually glad us revisiting this movie gave me a reason to revisit the original.
Yeah.
Because I think I first watched the original when I was in high school, and I hated it because it's very slow.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I got to when I rewatched it. I don't love it, but I appreciate it more. I get why people like it. I'm actually curious, was the original, was that kind of the start of like the cyberpunk genre? Had anyone done that before?
The
sort
question.
of future dystopian. Was this the first movie? Was Blade Runner the first movie to do that?
It might have been. I think it kind of, yeah, I'm trying to think of other ones that would have come out like around that time or afterwards. Like I know Dark City was a big one, but I think that came out in the 90s. I'm trying to think of anything else that might have been along those lines. Because the score for the original is definitely there. There's something interesting about the score of this movie where, as I was watching the original again, the score felt very 80s, but I still enjoyed it. But the score for 2049 was, it's very similar, but there's something about it that just feels much more modern and more exciting to me. And I don't know exactly what that is.
I think it's got more heart. There's something about it. Like,
yeah,
I noticed when I listened to it, there's something very soothing about it. But you're right. It still is definitely wildly influenced by the original. It's very influenced by the original. So it feels like it helps to tie these two films together. They feel like, one's a sequel to the other, but there's something very, very soothing. I don't know why I didn't think to look up, like, if Ridley Scott was the executive producer on this, and I don't know. Oh wait, I did look up one thing, what he thought about this movie. The only thing I saw that he said about it was that he would have cut 30 minutes out of it.
Yeah.
Well, Ridley, I would have cut your voiceover out of yours.
I don't know if this is true. This is something I read. This could be. It said that he was actually set to direct this movie originally, but then had to drop out due to scheduling with Alien Covenant. I don't know if that's true, but he said he regrets that decision and would have rather done this movie.
I don't.
But no, I know. I agree. I actually like Alien Covenant more than most people probably do. But no, I'm very happy that Denis did this.
I think for these like legacy sequels, I think this is this is almost the best way, can be the best way to go about it. I'm not saying the original directors can't do it. I think if they revisiting material from 20 years later, they might have an interesting insight, but I like this idea of a director with an actual vision.
Yeah.
Not just like not just like a director for hire, but somebody with an actual vision. I mean, I love the just bold as brass approach that Denis had. Is I want to make a sequel to Blade Runner so somebody else didn't fuck it up. Like, yes to that. But that's it. I think them doing this direct, like we think this one's better. I mean, Ridley Scott listed the original Blade Runner as what he believes to be one of the top 5 greatest sci-fi films of all time.
Okay.
He also said Alien was one of them, but good for you, Ridley. But yeah, I like seeing that. So,
yeah, I think like legacy sequels, like I know I'd mentioned earlier, I think that this might be like the most improved upon one, but I was thinking about it also, like it's like this and like Top Gun Maverick, I feel like are the two that really improve upon the original so much. And both of them have such simple stories to them that they just work as, they're not complicated, and they are easy enough to where somebody who hasn't seen the original can watch this and enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. They both vastly improve upon the originals, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I think this is interesting, and we're seeing, obviously, because everything's a franchise now, we're getting a lot more legacy sequels, and that's I'm fine with that by its nature, but I don't want to see. But it's the, why are we making this? It feels like Denis probably wanted to make a Blade Runner sequel because he had ideas. He was inspired by the world and the story of the original and wanted to jump off with, use that as a springboard to explore some new ideas in that world. Great. Do I think we need a third Blade Runner? No. If you're going to keep it within the world of replicants, and I think I read there's a series, Amazon maybe, that's going to be called Blade Runner 2099. I don't know. Maybe they'll do something interesting with it.
Okay.
I actually wonder. We've had 2 movies where they talk about being off world, and we've yet to see it. So maybe there's something to explore. But this is not something you can sequel to death. I mean, I think about, this might be an unpopular opinion, and Disney wouldn't like this. I don't think Star Wars lends itself to all the sequels.
No, I don't either.
I think George created a very wide, imaginative, vast world, but it all was in service of sort of this tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, which he told in 6 movies. So I don't think Star Wars necessarily lends itself to a bunch of sequels.
I agree. And it's a thing where it's like, once you get so much, you just start to lose interest in the original stories that you really liked. Or, I mean, not lose interest in those, but you lose interest in any new stories that are being told in that world, because they're just not as effective as the original stories that impacted you. And it's definitely something like, that's kind of where I've lost interest in a lot of Marvel things lately. I mean, after Endgame, it's like nothing is quite as good as that.
Well, I like, we talk about like somebody who makes something, somebody with a vision wants to make something. And I think the original Infinity Saga was a great example. That every one of those movies felt like it was made with love. It was made with talented storytellers wanting to tell a story. And ever since then, it's a content factory.
Yeah.
And we've talked about like Martin. I think this is what pisses Martin Scorsese off, is that this is, and that's why, this is what bothers me with sequels and franchises, and why I've moved away from them. But that's why, this is probably the only good, the thing that's good. Like, it would probably be much worse if financially Blade Runner 2049 had succeeded financially, because then they would have, launched into, they probably would have greenlit like 3 more sequels.
Yeah.
Whether
definitely.
Denis would or not have done them.
Yeah.
But we don't need it.
No, we
Let
don't.
it go soon. All right. Yeah, so Blade Runner 2049, in case you missed it, check it out. It's great. It's yeah, if you're looking for a good story well told, if you want to see something that's just visually striking, check this movie out.
And you don't even have to bother with the first Blade Runner if you haven't seen it.
Nope.
To enjoy this.
It'll fill it all in. So yeah, I would say definitely watch it. Since Josh and I do cover spoilers in these, we thought it'd be a good idea to tell people what we're going to cover next. So maybe they want to watch it before we do our review of it. Yeah. And we've decided on the movie Moneyball, directed by Bennett Miller. Josh,
very excited for that.
Josh is having his own climax at the thought of doing Moneyball for the next one. I think he's already watched it 3 times in preparation for this.
And I've watched it probably 40 other times just in general. So
great. And I have never seen it. So
I'm excited to.
This will be a first viewing for me. It would certainly not be the first time I've enjoyed shitting all over something Josh likes.
Yep. I'm looking forward.
Like Suicide Squad and his first child.
The Academy Award winning Suicide Squad. And my non-Academy Award winning first child.
All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We will have our plan is to have post one of these a month, and our next movie will be Moneyball. So give it a watch, and we will catch everybody next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Toodles.
You do not know what pain is yet. You will learn.
Where is he?
The future of the species is finally unearthed.